Hi, this is Amber Rain Davis from NotableInk.com, and I'm so excited to be hopping along with the Altenew March Build-a-Flower Dahlia Blog Hop. This is such a beautiful stamp, and my intention was to only make a watercolor card. But things went a little awry, and if you follow me, then you may have seen some of my CPR videos or Craft Project Resuscitation video series, and this card made it into that series because I just wasn't happy with the watercolor, and so I had to figure out what I was going to do to save the card. So I went ahead and did that, and then I was so inspired by the design that came out of it that I wanted to create 2 more cards in the same vein. So I'm going to share that with you today, and I'm going to speed through some of these stamping and masking so that we can get to the card, because there was about 3 hours of footage for this. So I'm stamping the images with Ranger Antique Linen Distress ink because I wanted to do a no-line watercolor look. I'm going to use the Altenew watercolor brush markers, and I'm showing you more colors than I actually used. I think what I ended up using on this particular flower was the Citrus Burst, Ruby Red, and Autumn Blaze. So I'm going to squeeze some pigment out onto my glass mat, and then in order to paint, I'm going to use a number 6 round brush from the Silver Brush Company. It's from the Black Velvet line. I find that I have a little more control of my water with a regular brush versus going straight to the paper with this, although I am going to try that in the video, so you will get to see that. And on these first few petals, I'm going to try a couple different techniques. I'm going to try wet on wet, wet to dry, a combination of both, and just try and figure out what technique I want to go to. So first off, I went wet to dry, and then I just blended it out with a little clean, clear water. And then once you add your second color, it's basically got like going on wet to wet, because the yellow is already wetting the paper surface. And then when you drop in the next color, it starts to, kind of wick away into the pigment that's already there. And so again, I'm just playing around with the technique. I feel like these first few flowers look really flat to me, even though there's a gradation of color. And I have no idea why I did that petal right there. It's totally blending into the petal next to it because that petal is still wet. So don't do that. Pick a petal that is not adjacent to one that you just did. There's plenty of petals there to be able to do that. Now this one I felt better about. It's more pigmented and it has more shadow. Here I tried to go straight to paper with the brush, but because I had squeezed out the pigment, there was so much. So I just blended that out, and then so that was the technique that I used for the rest of it, is to take the yellow straight to the paper without it being wet, and then drop in the other colors and then blend it out with just a slightly damp brush. Here I felt like I wanted to have more depth. So again, they still looked kind of flat to me. So I'm taking the ruby red and almost drawing on the shadows with the brush, and then I'm using a slightly damp brush and blending that out. For the blue flower, I'm going to use Persian Blue and Sea Breeze. And so again, I go straight to the paper with the Sea Breeze, and I'm going to leave just a little white spot, a little highlight, and I'm going to use a damp brush to just blend out those harsh edges. And then I'll come in with the Persian Blue and drop that in and let it kind of wick into the flower. If there's any harsh edges, I'll go ahead and blend that out. But you can see there was too much water on my brush there because everything started to reseed. The water was just pushing that dark pigment back towards the top of the petal, so I needed to come in with more. So I'm going to fast forward through that, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to, reestablish those darker shadows there with the Prussian blue, and then just blend it out with seriously barely any water at all. You want just a slightly damp brush. Now for the purple petals, I used only Midnight Violet, and I basically kind of drew it on. This is almost like what I would do with watercolor pencils, is I kind of do an outline and then I just draw that pigment into the flower with a damp brush. So I'm kind of going more in that with that technique. So a little bit different for this particular flower. The Midnight Violet is so super pigmented. It's one of my favorite colors. There I'm just drying it so that I can do some adjacent petals, but it's so pigmented that you can draw it out almost into a pink color and have plenty of shadow in the depths. So let's just pause here and talk about these leaves. I didn't even film painting these leaves because I disliked what was happening so much. So from the get-go, I didn't like how I stamped the arrangement of the leaves. And then when I started painting them, I had taken a break for a couple hours and come back and I got out of my groove. And so the leaves just looked really flat to me, and it seemed like no matter what I did, I just didn't like them. So I stepped away from it, and then ultimately I decided to cut up this card and kind of mask the leaf situation. Now, the downside is, of course, I didn't film that, and I did end up really liking the card after I went through all of that process, and I wanted to share it with you. Well, I wasn't about to watercolor another card, so I decided, okay, let's do the same design, but with the layer stamps. That way you get both of the different techniques, and then I'll show you how I cut it up and did the frames and everything with the layer stamp card. Now, I'm not going to share the stamping, but I'll have the colors that I used listed in my blog and then also down below in the product section. And make sure you refer to your stamp packaging for the layering guide. And so this version, you can see that I added the darker layer of the leaves. So when comparing the two cards, I felt like the watercolor version had a little more depth because we used those darker shadows in the recesses. So what I'm now doing now is just using my warm gray artist markers and going in. I started off with, I think, the second lightest gray, and it just wasn't enough. So I kept grabbing each successive darker marker and adding a few more touches here and there to get more contrast and more shadow, just to pop these flowers off the page a little bit more. Now, funnily enough, I did not like how I stamped these leaves either. I don't know what was going on with the leaves. I just didn't like, I don't know, maybe I didn't like where I put the flowers, and I just didn't like the arrangement. So again, this whole framing technique came in handy. So I have an A2 size rectangle frame there, and then I have, which is the size of the card, and I'm going to use 2 steps down. Well, I don't know. It looks like it's 1/4 of an inch on either side smaller. And I'm just going to I'm going to nest these two together, get them lined up, and then I'm going to tape the dies together so that they stay in the same configuration and don't move. I'm also obviously going to tape it to the cardstock, but I want to get them centered before I add any tape at all. Once I get them taped down and everything is secure, I'm going to take it to my die cut machine and run that through. And this is going to cut it into 3 separate pieces. So just make sure you gently remove the tape, because that would be the worst if your cardstock tore at this point. So here's the 3 pieces, and so the center piece isn't going to be used on this card, but hang on to that and your one from the watercolor card if you make these, because we're going to do a bonus card with that. So I'm adding some glue to the frame that will go directly on the black A2 size piece of cardstock. The middle piece will be popped up with sticky back fun foam. This gorgeous sentiment is from Altenew's Better Together stamp set, and I just love it. I always love sentiments that have a sans serif and a script font. They're my favorite. I love it. So I'm just double stamping that, and we'll get this centerpiece popped up, like I said, on some fun foam. Usually, I always use sticky back fun foam. The reason I do that is because I like to glue the pieces down, and if I put the glue directly on the back of the cardstock, sometimes I can see it from the front, and I like to glue it because it gives me a little wiggle room to get it straight. So I always put the sticky back of the foam directly to the card front. And of course, when I put my block on there, the block was dirty. It had ink on it, so I got ink on my card. I'm telling you, these cards nearly did me in. But we're going to splatter, so I'm not even going to try and get it off anymore. So I just have some, I think this is the Moss watercolor brush marker is what this is. And I'm just splattering that on with a big flat brush. And after I do the green, I'm going to come in with the Altenew Jet Black ink spray. So I have, I can get a little crazy with my ink splatter, and I should be stopping right now. Like, I need to stop and then come in with the black. So I do much better with the ink splatter when it's from the ink spray. So I probably need to get more colors. Like, I probably should get a green I have black, white, and I have some of the teals and orange. Oh, actually, orange would have been. I have orange. But I'm so much more successful with ink splatter like this. So I knock all of it off the nozzle straight into the bottle, and then I just flick it lightly, and I think you get a much more random pattern than you do with a brush, and I'm much more successful with this. So this is my preferred way to do it. And so here we have the two cards next to each other. And I like them. You guys let me know in the comments which one you like better. I think I like the layer stamp one better, which is sad because the watercolor took a long time. But in any case, so I had these two frames, one from the watercolor card, one from the layer stamp card. And they were so pretty, I didn't want to throw them away. So I tried to come up with another card design. So I cut down a piece of black cardstock. I'm going to pop that up like we did our centerpiece from the other two cards. I stamped a sentiment from that same Better Together stamp set on a square piece of cardstock. And I'm going to take my two frames and line them up. And basically, I am lining them up so that the space between the frame and the black cardstock is similar, if not the same, than what the white is to the black. So the white card base to the black. Just so that it's a little more pleasing to the eye. I'm going to trim that off from the back. And then what I'm going to do from the front is just add, just because my center is popped up, I just need to add just a little piece of foam adhesive. Those are just little foam squares right under those little tabs that, cross over the black and go onto the white, just to pop those up. I popped up my sentiment in the middle, and that's it. And I think I actually like this card better than the other two, which is crazy. But I do. I like it. I like it best because it's different and unique. So here are the finished cards. I'm glad that I continued it. It was quite a bit of work, but I'm glad I didn't give up because ultimately I think this is a great 3 set of cards, and I learned a lot and I got creative on how to save the cards. So I hope that you guys enjoyed these projects today, and it gives you some ideas to do if you're not liking a project that you're working on. It gives you some ideas of how you can save it and still use it and ultimately really like it, and maybe come up with another new design as a bonus along the way. Be sure to visit my blog post. There's a link down below. I do have a giveaway sponsored by Altenew, and make sure that you're commenting on the blog hop because there's lots of chances for prizes as well. Thank you so much for stopping by, and have a great day. I'll link a couple extra videos from that CPR series so you can check those out as well.